Infidelity is a complex and emotionally charged topic that often reveals the intricacies of human relationships. While the narratives surrounding cheating can vary widely, they frequently explore themes of betrayal, longing, and the quest for identity amid turmoil. In the story of Jenny and her family, we witness the devastating impact of her choices, not just on herself but on those around her. As secrets unravel and emotions escalate, the characters are forced to confront their truths and the consequences of their actions. Through their experiences, we are reminded of the fragility of trust and the profound resilience of hope as they navigate the tumultuous waters of love, loss, and redemption. This tale invites readers to reflect on the delicate balance between desire and commitment, and how our decisions ultimately shape our destinies. Often question whether I'm truly the ideal husband. My job is quite demanding, and there are times when I come home in a less than cheerful mood. I'm certainly not the best provider either. I'm no millionaire, but we manage well enough. We live comfortably with a nice home, 2 luxury cars. My wife has a closet full of beautiful clothes, and our 8-year-old daughter Jennifer is spoiled with countless expensive toys. Ultimately, I'm just a regular guy who works hard and loves his family deeply. Linda and I have been married for almost 12 years, and for the most part, our marriage has been wonderful. However, over the last couple of months, something has been off between us. It's hard to explain, but there's been a subtle shift in her behavior. She's been distant, almost aloof, and at times she'll criticize me for things that never bothered her before. It's out of character for her. I've tried talking to her about it, asking if there's something wrong, but she always brushes it off, claiming she's just tired or had a rough day. At first, I decided to give her space, thinking maybe she was dealing with something personal. But as time went on, her coldness only grew more frustrating. Anyone who's been married knows how a rift like that can seep into all aspects of the relationship, especially intimacy. I've always made an effort to keep the spark alive, surprising her with flowers or planning romantic gestures. But lately, those efforts are met with nothing more than a polite thank you and a quick kiss on the cheek. It's been weeks since Linda initiated any affection. Whenever I try, she either seems uninterested or falls back on the classic, "I have a headache" excuse. When we do share those rare, intimate moments, she seems detached, leaving me to handle everything, emotionally and physically. Over time, I found myself withdrawing as well, choosing to focus more on Jennifer and less on my wife when I get home, which of course only made things worse. Desperation began to creep in. I couldn't stop myself from replaying the last few months over and over in my head, trying to figure out where things went wrong. Was it something I did? Did I say something to hurt her? Every scenario I imagined led to the same troubling conclusion. Could Linda be seeing someone else? I tried to dismiss the thought. Linda would never cheat on me. Or would she? The nagging doubt wouldn't leave me alone. I started reading up on the signs of infidelity, changes in behavior, shifts in appearance, unusual schedules. Honestly, I hadn't noticed her dressing any differently, but then again, I only see her after I get home from work. I don't know what she wears or does during the day. She's always running errands, but for what exactly? I couldn't help but wonder. The signs were subtle but unsettling. Her attitude had changed, no doubt about that. But with no hard evidence, I couldn't justify hiring a private investigator, so I decided to take matters into my own hands. I began calling the house randomly during the day just to see if she was home. Sometimes she was, sometimes not. Then I installed an old external camera discreetly under the garage eaves, hoping to catch sight of any unfamiliar cars coming by while I was at work. For 2 weeks, nothing. No strange cars, no suspicious visitors. I started to wonder if I was overreacting. Still, her behavior continued to distance us. We hadn't been intimate in weeks, and her moods only seemed to worsen. Approaching our 12th anniversary, I decided it was time to change things up. I wanted to bring some excitement back into our relationship. I figured a nice night out, dinner, dancing, might be just what we needed to rekindle the spark. It had been ages since we'd done something fun together. I made arrangements for Jennifer to stay with my parents for the evening so we could enjoy a night to ourselves. I booked a table at Plato's, one of Linda's favorite restaurants. When we arrived, I could tell she was tense, but as dinner progressed, she began to relax. We ordered a bottle of wine, and slowly the conversation turned light and playful. For the first time in a long while, I saw glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with. After dinner, Linda suggested we hit the dance floor, which surprised me. I hadn't seen her this eager in months. I suggested trying out a new club that had recently opened, but she convinced me to go to our usual spot, a cozy venue with soft lighting and a romantic atmosphere, perfect for couples like us. We ordered a round of drinks and then made our way to the dance floor. The moment we started dancing, it was like old times. Linda seemed happy, and I could feel the tension between us begin to dissolve. We danced for nearly an hour, laughing and enjoying ourselves. It was as if, for a brief moment, everything was back to normal, but I couldn't shake the lingering doubts in my mind. Could this night really be the start of something new for us? Or was I simply trying to hold on to a relationship that had already slipped through my fingers? As we settled at our table for a brief respite, I perched on the edge of my chair, not fully sitting down. Linda, my beautiful wife, took a small sip from her glass of wine before excusing herself to the ladies' room. I watched her move with such grace, her hips swaying lightly as she made her way across the dance floor. In that moment of admiration, I wasn't the only one mesmerized by her elegance. From a corner table on the opposite side of the room, a handsome guy was watching her every step with keen interest. For a brief second, I thought I saw her make eye contact with him, which caused a ripple of doubt to form in my mind. Did they know each other? As she disappeared into the restroom, he cast a glance in my direction. Was it a smirk? Or was I imagining things? The distance made it hard to tell. I found myself wondering why this guy would come to a dance club alone. Maybe, like Linda, his date was in the ladies' room. I kept an eye on him as I awaited her return. When Linda walked back past him, I could have sworn they exchanged glances, and I definitely saw them both smile. All my earlier suspicions began to surface, bubbling under the surface of my mind. "Honey, would you mind getting me another glass of wine? This one's gone a bit stale," she requested as she sat back down. Already on edge, I wasn't thrilled about the idea of leaving her alone while I waited at the bar for a bartender who seemed to be in no hurry. When I caught the attention of one of the servers instead, I could swear Linda looked disappointed, almost like she had expected someone else. As the server, a young woman, approached, the unease within me grew. I looked back at the guy in the corner, still sitting alone. Something didn't feel right. I casually asked Linda if she knew him, catching her off guard. For a split second, panic flashed in her eyes before she quickly regained her composure. Her response was nonchalant, but her tone told me I was on to something. I pressed further, asking about the glance she'd exchanged with him earlier, but she denied ever looking at anyone. As our drinks arrived, I noticed her gaze dart over my shoulder. I turned to see Mr. Lonely himself striding over to our table. Without even acknowledging me, he had the audacity to ask Linda for a dance. I immediately declined on her behalf. He looked straight at me and with a smug expression said, "I was talking to the lady." Before I could stop myself, I shot back, "The lady is my wife, and I decide who she can and can't dance with." To my shock, Linda accused me of being rude. I asked her again if she knew him, and after hesitating, she confessed he was the guy she'd mentioned once before. My frustration flared. I couldn't believe this was happening. He had approached my wife without even acknowledging my presence, an act that felt not just rude but utterly disrespectful. As he tried to interject, I cut him off, saying, "I don't need your input, man." I turned back to Linda, trying to keep my composure, and told her if he had shown some respect and asked if I was okay with it, maybe I'd have considered it, but now, no chance. Linda's response was sharper than I'd ever heard from her. She said I was being ridiculous, insisting nothing was going on and reminding me that even though we were married, she wasn't my property. "If I want to dance with someone, I will," she added with a defiant edge to her voice. I was stunned. The woman I had been married to for 12 years had never spoken to me like that. The sting of her words hit harder than anything that night, and the romantic evening I had envisioned was quickly unraveling. Still, I tried to hold back my anger. "It's our anniversary," I reminded her. "I want to have fun with you, not watch you dance with some random guy. But if you really want to, go ahead. Just know that if you do, he's taking you home because I won't be here when you get back." 12 years of marriage had taught me how to read Linda like an open book, and I saw the anger in her eyes, but she couldn't see the same in mine. I glanced at the guy standing there, and feeling a sudden urge to end the tension, I mentioned how impolite it was to make him stand around while we argued. With a final look, Linda declared, "I'll dance with him, and we'll talk about this later." The guy smirked triumphantly, extending his hand toward her. To my disbelief, she took it, and they walked onto the dance floor together. I left before they even started dancing. I doubt they noticed my departure. About 8 blocks away, my phone rang. Linda's voice was softer now, almost apologetic as she asked where I was. "On my way home to pack a bag," I said flatly. "Why, where are you going?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "I don't know yet, but I'm done for tonight," I replied, feeling a surge of finality in my words. Linda was shocked. "It was just one dance," she protested. "You're really going to throw 12 years of marriage away over a lousy dance?" "It's not about the dance, Linda," I said quietly. "It's about respect. And tonight, you showed me none. That guy showed me none. For weeks now, it's been like this. You've been distant, disengaged, and now tonight, you can't even see why I'm upset." She fell silent, the weight of my words sinking in. After a long pause, she apologized, her voice barely above a whisper. But I wasn't sure if an apology was enough anymore. One night, I found myself driving home, leaving my wife, Linda, at the club. It was because of the way she behaved and the impression she gave that she might be involved with someone else. Linda had admitted to noticing the guy and exchanging glances with him while dancing, but she insisted it was nothing serious. She pleaded with me to come back and pick her up, but I refused. I reminded her of the warning I had given earlier. If she danced with that guy, she would need to find her own way home. I informed her that I was already pulling into our driveway and intended to be gone by the time she arrived. I even suggested that if she was having an affair, perhaps she should go home with him and forget about me. Linda was desperate, her voice trembling as she assured me she wasn't having an affair. She promised to grab a cab and begged me to stay put so we could talk things out when she got home. Her tone had shifted dramatically from earlier, and now she was pleading for understanding before we hung up. Once I pulled into the driveway, I went upstairs, packed a bag, and was out of the house in less than 15 minutes. But curiosity got the better of me. I parked down the street, turned off my lights, and waited. About 15 minutes later, a yellow cab pulled into our driveway, and I watched as Linda quickly got out and ran into the house. That was all I needed to see. I drove off and checked into a motel. Almost immediately, my phone started ringing, but I turned it off. I didn't have any hard evidence of infidelity, but my suspicions were strong. I couldn't shake the feeling that Linda and that guy knew each other. The next morning, I decided to take things a step further. I went through the yellow pages and found a private investigator with the best ad. After meeting him and giving a retainer, I went into work. My secretary, Tracy, immediately told me I needed to call my wife because Linda had already called the office 20 times, frantic. I explained to Tracy that Linda and I were having problems and that I wouldn't be returning her calls. I asked her to let Linda know that the next time she called. Later that day, Andrea, our neighbor and one of Linda's close friends, called. I anticipated the conversation would be about Linda, so I answered, not wanting to seem impolite. Andrea mentioned how Linda had been trying to apologize, saying I had refused to talk to her. I told Andrea that I had nothing to discuss with Linda. She sighed and mentioned Linda's denial of any affair, urging me not to jump to conclusions. I explained to Andrea that my suspicions were based on more than just that night. Linda had been acting strangely for over 2 months. Andrea tried to reassure me, saying she hadn't noticed any evidence of cheating. She pleaded with me to talk things out with Linda, emphasizing that avoiding her wouldn't solve anything. I told her I needed time to think and that I'd call Linda in a couple of weeks. Andrea promised to pass on the message. Over the next 2 weeks, I was on edge, checking in with the investigator regularly. Eventually, I got the call I had been waiting for. The investigator had a report ready. When I arrived at his office, he handed me a manila envelope, instructing me to go straight to page 5 for the most important information. Nervously, I flipped through the pages and reached the bottom of page 5. There, in black and white, were the words I wasn't sure I would ever read. After an exhaustive investigation, this office found no evidence supporting the client's suspicions of spousal infidelity. I was stunned. Relief washed over me, but so did a wave of guilt. The investigator assured me that they had tracked Linda's every move for the past 2 weeks, monitoring her calls, tailing her outings, and checking her phone records and credit card statements. There was no affair. The investigator advised me to go home to my wife and child, reminding me how rare it was to find happy endings in his line of work. Overwhelmed, I thanked him and left. I returned to my motel room and spent the weekend reflecting on everything that had happened. On Monday morning, I finally called Linda. She answered weakly, her voice filled with emotion. I could tell she had been crying. After a moment of silence, she apologized, admitting that she had taken me for granted. She acknowledged that I was right to warn the guy at the club and began crying again, confessing her lack of respect for me, despite her love. She pleaded for another chance, vowing never to make the same mistake. Her tone was sincere, and it surprised me considering her attitude at the club. When I didn't respond immediately, she panicked, assuming the worst. "You're not coming back, are you?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Yes, I am," I reassured her. But I made it clear that it would be on a trial basis. I told her that I wanted to get back the woman I fell in love with and married. Linda, still emotional, insisted that she would do everything in her power to rebuild our relationship. And so, cautiously, we began the process of healing. It had been 2 long months since Linda and I had been struggling. Despite her continued assurances that she was still waiting for the man she loved, I couldn't ignore the skepticism gnawing at me. I mentioned the bad attitudes, the lack of passion, and the overall disrespect I had felt during this time. Despite her sincerity, something still didn't sit right with me. I told her I would collect my things from the motel after work and come home later that evening. There was a pause, a silence that hung between us before she spoke again. Linda expressed her love for me, apologized for how she had treated me, and confessed her deep regret. She was scared of losing me, and wanted to make things right. While I heard her words, I couldn't fully let go of my lingering doubts. A part of me was still upset, and despite everything, I couldn't shake the feeling that Linda knew the guy I had seen her talking to at the dance hall. After work, I grabbed my belongings and went home. The moment I stepped through the door, Jay came running, nearly tackling me in her excitement. "Where have you been?" she asked, completely unaware of the problems between Linda and me. Linda, standing a few feet away, greeted me with open arms and smothered me in kisses. Her affection caught me off guard, but I couldn't help kissing her back with equal passion. Despite all my reservations, I realized I still loved my wife. That was 2 years ago, and since then, our married life has been wonderful again. Linda is once again the woman I married, both inside and outside of the bedroom. Just a couple of months ago, she threw me a surprise birthday party. In the past, we had always made her birthday a big deal, but it wasn't until I came back that we started celebrating mine, too. Last night was our 14th wedding anniversary, and Linda went all out. When I came home from work, she surprised me with tickets to a dinner theater where we saw Man of La Mancha, one of my favorite plays. Afterward, we took a drive down to the lakefront. The warm breeze off the water and the moonlight reflecting on the lake set the perfect atmosphere as we strolled along the shore. With my arm wrapped around her, I pulled her close, grateful for the beautiful anniversary she had planned. I whispered my appreciation, and she coyly acknowledged the arousal in my voice. We both knew it was time to head home. About half an hour later, we were back in our bedroom, lost in each other's embrace. Even now, 2 years later, I'm not entirely sure if Linda was ever unfaithful. I may never know for certain, but I'm glad I chose to come back. Although the calendar said spring had started a few weeks earlier, it was only today that the weather felt like it. I stepped outside, taking in the fresh scent of morning dew left behind by an overnight April shower. As I made my way to the car, I noticed wildflowers blooming defiantly in the yard, a sign that even after the harshest winters, life finds a way to start anew. On my drive to the local coffee shop, I felt lighter. I was meeting Kathy, an old friend I hadn't seen in a while. We met years ago at a school event. Our kids are the same age, and we've been close ever since. When I arrived, Kathy was already seated at our usual table by the window. She waved at me through the glass, and we exchanged warm smiles as I entered the cafe, the rich aroma of fresh coffee filling the air. We greeted each other with laughter and hugs, the kind of reunion that feels like no time has passed at all. As we sat down, the conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from old memories to funny stories about our kids. About an hour in, Kathy leaned forward, lowering her voice in that conspiratorial way that old friends do when they're about to share something juicy. "I've been seeing someone," she admitted. I nearly choked on my coffee. "Wait, what do you mean? Are you having an affair?" I asked, half shocked and half curious. Kathy smiled, almost mischievously. She explained that nothing had happened yet, but she was considering it. She had been spending time with a guy named Cody, and while she knew it was wrong, she confessed that being with him made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't looking to leave her husband, Bruce. She just wanted a little excitement, a fling to spice things up. "I would never let Bruce find out," she reassured me. "It would crush him if he knew." Cody was married too, and they both knew they had to be careful. As she spoke, I felt a wave of emotions stir inside me. For the past 2 years, I had kept a secret of my own, one I had never shared with anyone, not even Kathy. But as I looked at my friend, I decided it was time to take a risk. "Do you remember when Harry and I were going through that rough patch a couple of years ago?" I asked. Kathy nodded, though she admitted she didn't know many details. I took a deep breath before continuing. "He actually left me for a while," I confessed. The memory was painful, but I had never shared it with anyone. Kathy promised to keep it to herself, understanding the weight of such a secret, especially given her own situation. As we sipped our freshly brewed coffee, I felt the air between us shift, our friendship deepening as we both revealed our vulnerabilities. There was something cathartic about sharing this part of my past, even if I wasn't sure what the future held for either of us. After years of navigating the ups and downs of life, much like learning to ride a bike, Kathy and I finally found our balance, settling into a comfortable rhythm. We'd been friends for so long that we instinctively knew how to keep things steady. But one afternoon, everything shifted. Kathy, with her usual confidence, looked me straight in the eye and, without hesitation, declared, "Mark, you should move in with me." It wasn't a casual suggestion. It was a declaration, bold and unexpected. "Wait," I stammered, caught completely off guard. "That's a pretty big step. Aren't you worried that this might be, I don't know, a rebound?" Kathy propped herself up on one elbow, giving me that look, the one that radiated a mixture of warmth and fierce determination. "Mark, we've known each other practically our whole lives," she started, raising her hand slightly as if to cut off any objections before they even left my mouth. "We're adults. Too old for games and uncertainty. This is a win-win. You need a place. I have a house with space. I value you, you value me. We both have needs. So why waste money paying rent to some stranger when you could be helping me pay the mortgage? Besides," she added with a smile, "you know this house better than anyone else." I hesitated. This was a lot to process. "But Kathy," I began, gesturing toward my old house across the street where Amanda, my ex, still lived. "Won't it be awkward? I mean, Amanda's right there." Kathy shrugged, her confidence unshaken. "I'm not worried about her, Mark. I've stopped caring about what people think. The only opinion that matters here is yours. Plus, that house is still in your name. It's a huge investment, and by living here, you're protecting it, keeping an eye on things. It just makes sense." Her logic was solid, and eventually I agreed. But the transition wasn't easy. At first, it felt strange, almost like I was playing a role in someone else's life. Amanda, on the other hand, struggled more openly. She wasn't ready to let go. One afternoon, while I was patching up a crack in her driveway, Amanda couldn't contain her frustration any longer. "Mark," she blurted out, her voice tinged with anger. "When are you coming back home? This is ridiculous. You know you belong here with me." I paused, taking in the weight of her words before I spoke. "Amanda, I'm sorry, I really am. But we're not getting back together. It's time for both of us to move on." Her expression shifted from anger to desperation. "Move on? To who, Mark? I work in a salon full of quirky hairstylists, and most of my clients are jaded first wives. I never thought I'd end up like them." Her voice cracked slightly, and for a moment she looked as lost as I felt. I didn't know what to say, so I continued gathering my tools in silence. "Please, Mark," she pleaded, her voice softer now. "Can't we just give it one more try? Let's forget about everything that happened and move forward, for the boys. The holidays are coming and they need us to be together." I stood up and faced her, my expression gentle but firm. "Amanda, I've already forgiven you. But for over 10 years, you had chances to make things right, and you didn't. And as for forgetting, well, that's not something I can do. The boys will be back from school soon and we can make it work. We'll have separate dinners, one at your place and one at Kathy's, just like before." Amanda crossed her arms, her stubbornness coming through. "I'm not setting foot in that woman's house and I don't want her in mine." I shrugged, not knowing how else to respond. "Then I guess we'll miss you." Despite my fears about how the boys would handle the new family dynamic, they adapted better than I ever could have expected. They navigated the awkwardness of 2 holiday dinners with ease, not wanting to upset either of us. And to my surprise, it was the boys who eventually convinced Amanda to visit Kathy's house on Christmas Eve. While Kathy had graciously invited her to stay longer, Amanda declined. But it was a step in the right direction. As time passed, Amanda slowly began to soften toward Kathy. While they may never be friends again, they've managed to coexist for the sake of the kids. It's not perfect, but it's progress. A year into living with Kathy, I realized I was happier than I'd ever been. Our relationship wasn't the wild, passionate love of our youth, but it was something deeper, more meaningful, built on trust, affection, and respect. One evening, feeling a sense of obligation and perhaps a bit of tradition tugging at me, I brought up the idea of marriage. "Kathy," I began cautiously, "I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Maybe it's time we made things official?" Kathy smiled, her eyes soft as she gently cupped my face. "Mark," she said, her voice steady and sure, "you're everything I could ever want, and I want to be with you forever. But I made a promise to myself years ago. I'll only marry once. I hope you can understand that." It took me a moment to process what she was saying. It wasn't the answer I expected, but as I stood there, I recalled something my dad used to say. "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." And with Kathy, nothing felt broken. In fact, everything felt stronger than it had in years. As Kathy absorbed the weight of my story, she sat in stunned silence, her eyes wide as I continued recounting the events that had nearly destroyed my marriage. It all started innocently enough, just lunch with Terry, a co-worker who always seemed overly friendly but harmless. The first few lunches felt casual, but by the third, things had shifted. I could feel the pull of something I didn't want to acknowledge. At that third lunch, Terry pushed harder. He invited me back to his apartment, and while I managed to resist, it became clear that our lunches were edging toward dangerous territory. I made excuses, but Terry wasn't deterred, his frustration growing. I knew deep down that another lunch could lead us somewhere we shouldn't go. As we left the restaurant, I offhandedly mentioned I needed a new dress because Harry and I were going out for our anniversary. I brought up a dance club where we used to go for fun. Terry seized the opportunity, arrogantly declaring that he'd be there too. He claimed it would teach Harry a lesson, show him how desirable I was, and make him appreciate me more. I objected, but Terry dismissed my concerns, convinced he knew what was best for me. Kathy shook her head in disbelief, interrupting my story. "Wait, Terry actually showed up? He crashed your anniversary date?" I nodded, feeling the weight of that night all over again. "Yeah, he did. As soon as Harry and I walked into the club, I saw him. At first, I didn't say anything. I didn't want to ruin the night. We were actually having a good time. But then Terry came over right in front of Harry and asked me to dance. Kathy gasped, whispering, "Oh my God." I nodded again. To make it worse, Terry completely ignored Harry. He acted like he wasn't even there, which, understandably, made Harry furious. He told me flat out that if I danced with Terry, he'd leave. I was so mad in the moment that I brushed him off, said I'd dance with Terry anyway, thinking he was bluffing. Kathy leaned in, eyes wide. "So you danced with Terry? What was that like?" I sighed. It was awful. Terry was holding me close, but all I could think about was Harry. I kept looking over at him, seeing how upset he was, and my heart sank. I was so distracted that I didn't even realize we'd gone into a second dance. By the time I snapped out of it, I told Terry it was over. I was going to spend the rest of the night with my husband. But it wasn't that easy, Kathy guessed, sensing more to the story. No, it wasn't. As I walked back to the table, Terry followed me, saying he wanted to apologize to Harry. But I knew it was a lie. He wasn't sorry. He just wanted to make Harry feel worse. When I got back, Harry wasn't there. Terry sat down like he owned the place, ordering more drinks and making himself comfortable. Kathy's expression turned serious. "Where was Harry?" "In the men's room, I thought," I replied, my voice lowering. But then the waitress came over and asked if we wanted to start a new tab because Harry had already paid ours, and left. He just left me there. Kathy's hand flew to her mouth. "He just walked out?" I nodded, my throat tight as I recalled that sinking feeling of abandonment. It hit me so hard. I'd pushed Harry too far, and now he was gone. I tried to reach out to him, to get him to come back and pick me up, but when I called, he told me he was packing a bag. He thought I was having an affair with Terry. Tears welled up in my eyes, and Kathy's face mirrored my distress. She reached out, placing a comforting hand on mine. What happened next? I pleaded with him to come back, to talk things through, but he wouldn't. He said he needed time to think. I was terrified I'd ruined everything. Our marriage, our family. The guilt was overwhelming. I realized it wasn't Harry who had taken me for granted. It was me who had taken him and our life together for granted. I wiped away tears as they started to fall again. That night, I took a cab home, and when I got there, Harry was gone. I tried calling him, but his phone was off. I spent the next 2 weeks in agony, waiting, wondering if he'd come back. Kathy leaned in closer, her voice soft. "What about Terry? What did he do?" "He kept pushing," I replied bitterly. "He said Harry didn't deserve me, that I should just go home with him instead. I told him to drop dead. He tried one last time outside the club, even tried to kiss me as the cab pulled up. I kneed him in the groin and told him if he ever contacted me again, I'd file a harassment suit. That was the last I saw of him." Kathy gave a small, supportive smile through her concern. "And Harry? Did he ever come back?" I nodded, wiping my eyes. "Eventually, yes. After 2 weeks, he finally called. He said he needed time to think and that he wasn't ready to talk yet, but he didn't want to walk away from us. It was the hardest 2 weeks of my life, pretending everything was okay in front of our daughter, Jennifer, when inside I was breaking. I was so scared I'd lost him for good." Kathy squeezed my hand, her voice gentle. "But you didn't. You're still together." "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We're still together. But it took a long time to rebuild what I almost destroyed, and I'll never forget how close I came to losing everything." Kathy nodded solemnly, and we sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what I had shared hanging between us. Here's a longer, more engaging rewrite of your story for an American audience, with additional details and a smoother flow while retaining the original character names. With tears in my eyes, I found myself apologizing to Kathy. It was hard to talk about even now after all this time. Taking a deep breath, I began to share the painful journey I had walked, each word heavy with emotion. As I revealed more of the story, I stressed how dangerously close I came to losing everything: my family, my marriage, my happiness. That terrifying possibility forced me to confront the deeper meaning of love and commitment. It wasn't just about passion or lust. It was about the kind of love that can weather any storm. The love Harry and I shared was irreplaceable, and I knew how incredibly lucky I was to still have him in my life. Kathy listened quietly, her eyes thoughtful, as she admitted she wasn't sure how she would cope if her husband ever left her. When she asked if I had ever told Harry the truth, I felt a knot in my chest. I explained how I had been too afraid, too terrified of losing him. I had come so close once, and I couldn't bear the idea of him finding out what I had hidden from him. Since that day, I have done everything in my power to be the best wife possible, showing Harry love and appreciation every single day. I no longer took our marriage or him for granted, but I still lived in constant fear of what would happen if he discovered the truth. Kathy gave my hand a reassuring squeeze, thanking me for sharing my story. She told me that my honesty had helped her reconsider a mistake she almost made. Feeling a sense of relief, we talked about getting together again soon, making tentative plans before parting ways. As I walked home, I felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, knowing that my confession may have saved my friend from a decision she would one day regret. When I got home, I had plenty of time to welcome my daughter Jennifer home from school. I greeted her with a kiss and her favorite snack, watching her with awe as I realized how quickly she was growing up. Soon she'd be 10 years old. Time flies, I thought to myself, marveling at how the years had passed. Later that evening, when Harry returned home from work, I greeted him with warm hugs and kisses, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the life we had built together. Talking with Kathy earlier had reminded me just how precious it all was. That night, after Harry had fallen asleep beside me, I lay awake, propping myself up on my elbow. I traced the lines on his face, each one telling the story of our life together. With a gentle touch, I followed the faint creases, my heart swelling with love and admiration for this man who had been my partner for so many years. Leaning down, I pressed a soft kiss to his lips, and to my delight, his smile met mine. He pulled me into a warm embrace, whispering, and I laughed, surprised that he was still awake. Harry chuckled, explaining that he had been thinking about Jennifer's upcoming birthday. We started talking about the future, and when I playfully suggested we give Jennifer a baby brother or sister, I wasn't entirely joking. We had talked about having another child before, but we had never made a decision. This time, Harry's broad smile gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, we were ready. 2 months later, we celebrated Jennifer's 10th birthday with a big backyard party. We invited all of her friends, making sure there was plenty of ice cream and cake for everyone. As the party wound down, we had one last surprise for Jennifer, a big one. With joy in our hearts, we shared the news that soon she would have a baby brother. It was a moment I will never forget, Jennifer's eyes lighting up as she realized her world was about to change in the most exciting way. Story 2. Hold on, little brother. Commander Derek leaned down, pressing his unshaven cheek against his wounded comrade's. Hang in there, little brother, he whispered before pulling back, giving the soldier's shoulder a firm pat. His eyes, however, betrayed the truth. He knew this might be the last time they'd see each other. The other fighters had left him a few grenades and full magazines, but they exchanged handshakes without meeting each other's gaze. Everyone understood the grim reality. They would likely never meet again in this life. As Derek watched the rest of the squad disappear with the wounded, he turned to the task at hand. He began stacking stones around the BM, leaving just enough space to fire. When his makeshift barricade was finished, he unsheathed his favorite tanto knife, placing it beside him. After a moment of hesitation, he also set down his pistol. Lighting a cigarette, Derek took a drag, knowing it wouldn't change the outcome, but it calmed his nerves as he surveyed the landscape through his binoculars. There was no other way through the pass. The enemy would come. Derek knew they'd have no choice but to cross right where he waited. A wry grin spread across his face. Maybe this was the end, but at least he'd make it a good one. Half an hour later, he spotted the first scouts. 3 new recruits wandered down the path, their careless swagger suggesting they didn't think much of the danger ahead. Derek had been trained well, and his reflexes were sharp. With a smooth pull of the trigger, he fired a short burst. 2 of the recruits fell as if they had hit an invisible wall. The third, stunned, bolted back, shouting in a guttural language. Soon the air was thick with gunfire. Bullets zipped overhead, ricocheting off the rocks around Derek, showering him with splinters of granite. He fired back carefully, conserving ammunition, but the enemy caught on quickly. They spread out, taking cover behind large rocks, their return fire pinning him down. Several bullets struck dangerously close to his makeshift barrier, and out of the corner of his eye, Derek spotted a bearded recruit aiming a grenade launcher directly at him. Without thinking, Derek ripped the pin from his grenade and threw it toward the enemy. The explosion rocked the mountain pass, silencing the firefight for a brief moment. Derek knew the quiet wouldn't last. The bandits would regroup, and it would start all over again. Glancing at the darkening sky, Derek realized nightfall was fast approaching. Here in the mountains, night came early, and soon he wouldn't be able to see the enemy as well. They, however, were still out there, trying to encircle him, preparing for one final attack. As Derek settled in for what would likely be his last stand, he wondered if his men had made it to the helicopter in time. He hoped so. He realized that if they had, then all that mattered was that he didn't die too soon. Otherwise, all of this, everything, would have been for nothing. As Derek sprinted toward the trench, the enemy forces had already closed in to less than 100 meters. He took deep breaths, darting forward in short bursts while narrowing the gap, hoping to keep the enemy pinned behind the rocks. Firing short, controlled bursts from his rifle, he managed to hold them off for a while. But eventually, he ran out of grenades. A sudden impact, he was hit in the head. Hot blood trickled down his face, and he instinctively wiped it off with the palm of his hand before collapsing onto his back. Derek stared up at the indifferent, starry sky, watching as random constellations blurred in his vision. For reasons he couldn't explain, tears began to well in his eyes. Men don't cry, he thought to himself. At least no one was there to see him. He turned onto his stomach once again, refocusing through the scope of his automatic rifle. Each squeeze of the trigger reduced the number of enemies, but the loss of blood was starting to take its toll. His vision blurred and dizziness set in, but he refused to let himself falter. When the last of his ammunition was gone, he grabbed a knife with his left hand and a pistol with his right, ready for one final charge. As he rose for the attack, a helicopter flew overhead, taking the fighters to safety, leaving him behind to cover their retreat. They had no idea if Derek was still alive. Even as they crossed the border, thousands of miles away in the mountains, the sound of gunfire echoed in the distance. I entered the office reception area and immediately noticed the secretary's wide, panicked eyes. She jumped up from her desk, stepping in front of the door as if to physically block me from entering. Jenny asked not to be disturbed. "She's extremely busy," she stammered, her arms practically outstretched to prevent me from walking past. With a calm yet firm gesture, I moved her aside. "It's fine, Zora. This doesn't apply to me," I said, placing my hand on the door handle and pushing it open. Inside, my wife, Jenny, shot up from the couch, fumbling to button her blouse. Seated next to her was a man, broad-shouldered and smug, who didn't even bother standing. He simply stared at me with a cocky grin. "Eric, what are you doing here? I told you," she stammered, taking a deep breath. "No one was supposed to come in." I stepped forward, my heart pounding. I thought that didn't apply to me. The man, undeterred by my presence, stood up leisurely, adjusting his jacket. He turned to Jenny with a grin, completely ignoring me. "Jenny, we'll talk later. I'm waiting for your call." Without another word, he brushed past me as if I were invisible, leaving the room with that same irritating smirk on his face. My wife sank back into her chair, still trying to regain control of the situation. "Why are you barging into my office without knocking, Eric? You're undermining my authority," Jenny snapped, trying to sound in control but failing miserably. I stared at her, trying to process what had just happened. "Undermining your authority?" I repeated, incredulous. "Is making out with another man during work hours not undermining your authority?" She crossed her arms, her commanding tone kicking in again. "By the way, I have some questions about your work performance. Your numbers have almost halved in the past 6 months. This is unacceptable, and if you can't fix it, I'll have no choice but to fire you. I couldn't believe it. She was actually trying to turn this on me. Fire me? I said, my voice rising. Should I write my resignation letter now, or are you going to go through the formalities and fire me by article? Jenny stood up, her face flushed with anger. Get out. Your dismissal order will be ready by the end of the day, and don't bother going home. My driver will bring you your things. We'll talk about our personal lives later. Without another word, I turned and left. A wave of cold rage swept over me as I walked past the bewildered secretary and back toward my office. I grabbed the few personal belongings I had, tossed them into a box, and shrugged into my coat. Just as I was heading toward the exit, my boss intercepted me. Where are you going, Eric? We have clients depending on you. Orders are closing and you can't just walk out. I smiled politely but firmly. I don't work here anymore. You'll have to take over. Before he could respond, I pushed through the doors and walked out into the hallway. The employees I passed gave me sympathetic looks. Word of my dismissal had already spread like wildfire through the office. Once I handed my security pass to the guard, I stepped outside, breathing in the cold, liberating air. I was free, finally free of Jenny's manipulative grasp. Back in her office, Jenny slumped into her chair, her best friend Leona bouncing in her seat, shocked by what had just transpired. Are you insane, Jenny? Firing your own husband? What's your father going to say? Jenny sighed, rubbing her temples. Leona, my dad knows exactly who I'm married to. Eric's a bum, and anyone else in my position would have made a scene and slapped that idiot across the face. Leona shook her head in disbelief. Jenny, you have kids together. Why would you provoke him like this? Jenny's phone rang just then, and her father's voice came through the line. Hi, sweetheart. I heard Eric brought you the contracts today. Good job. He's locked down Kulia. Be sure to thank him tonight. He deserves it. Jenny gritted her teeth, realizing her father had no idea what had just unfolded. Yeah, sure, Dad, she muttered. Hanging up, she sat in silence, wondering how she could ever fix this mess she'd created. I shouldn't have tried to control him, I thought as I watched Jenny call for a car. She left the firm in the hands of the deputy and stormed out, determined to fix the situation. Are you seriously going to your father's party, Jenny? I asked, barely glancing at her. And you're taking Hubert with you? You're openly involved with him now, and you're still pretending this is normal? I stood with my back to her, focusing on the bourbon I was pouring into a glass. The amber liquid caught the light, and for a moment I admired its rich color. I took a slow sip, letting the burn settle as I finished it off, even swallowing the ice. I didn't know much about bourbon or any other liquor, but I needed something to keep my hands busy, to keep my thoughts from spiraling. Eric, cut it out, Jenny sighed. Hubert is just a business partner. There's nothing between us and there never will be. You know that. Her words were careful, but I sensed an ambiguity I couldn't shake. I hesitated, searching for the right response. I only love you, Jenny, I said quietly. But even as I spoke, I felt like something was off. Dad wants us to be there together, she added, her tone lighter, as if to smooth over my concerns. He said he has something important to talk to you about. She kissed me on the lips, a gesture that should have felt intimate, but instead felt rehearsed. Then, without waiting for my response, she went off to get dressed. I stood there, holding the empty glass, unsure of what to think. After a minute, I walked to the bathroom, deciding to shave before the party. On my way past our bedroom, I heard her voice, soft and hushed, through the half-open door. She was on the phone, clearly trying to keep it low-key so I wouldn't overhear. Yes, it's all fine, she whispered. He's not even capable of jealousy. Come over, we'll have time. She giggled quietly, the sound like a punch to the gut. Just you, kisses, she said, her voice playful. I hurried past, not wanting her to know I'd heard. But that moment replayed in my head as we arrived at her father's party. It was already dark, and the lawn was lit up with colorful lights, setting the scene for a lively event. For a while, Jenny and I mingled with the guests, putting on a show of being a happy couple. But the act felt hollow. Soon enough, she excused herself to talk to her mother, leaving me to wander over to a group of men gathered around a barbecue. The smell of grilling meat filled the air, but before I could reach them, I overheard a familiar voice. Hubert's. "She's quite something? Don't worry, we'll be just fine," Hubert was saying, laughing with a group of men. I couldn't tell who he was referring to, but I had a sick feeling in my stomach. "What about the husband?" someone asked. "The husband? That idiot? He'll hold a candle for us," Hubert replied, his voice smug. I froze. He was talking about me. As I stood there listening, the conversation continued, and it became clear Hubert was bragging about my wife, about how she was too good for me. "Jenny's too smart for him. She knows exactly what she's doing," he added. The laughter that followed felt like knives in my chest. The world slowed down, and I realized every word he was saying was about her, about us. Hubert didn't see me standing just behind him, but the men he was talking to did. Their laughter stopped abruptly, and an uncomfortable silence settled over the group. Hubert turned to see what had caused the change in atmosphere, and when he saw me standing there, his smirk faltered. But it was too late for him to backtrack. He tried to play it off. "Where's your wife?" he asked, mocking me. "Her mother called her to talk," I said quietly, not trusting myself to speak any louder. "And who were you talking about?" I added, knowing full well what the answer was. "Your wife," Hubert said, still trying to keep up the pretense, though the men around him had gone silent. No one laughed with him now. "Go call her here. Tell her I'm calling," he said, pushing me in the shoulder as if he had the upper hand. What happened next was a blur. There was a crunch of bone as I shoved him hard, and Hubert stumbled back, landing awkwardly on the red-hot brazier behind him. His cheek touched the scalding metal, and the smell of burning flesh filled the air. For a moment, everything was still. Hubert lay there, stunned, his face blistering from the heat. Then suddenly, he rolled off the grill and fell into the grass, his cheek a bright red mark in the dim evening light. The men around us rushed to his aid, shouting for an ambulance, but I was already walking away. "Poor Hubert," someone muttered. "Broke his arm and got a toasted face all in one go." I didn't stay to hear the rest. I left the party, driving aimlessly through the night until I ended up at the old factory I had secretly purchased months ago. It was an abandoned building on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a grove of birch trees. I had bought it as a place to retreat, a place where I could think. Only a handful of people knew about it, and certainly not Jenny or her father. The second floor of the factory had been renovated into a modest living space. I'd installed security cameras around the perimeter and even set up some inside our home, more out of paranoia than anything else. I never thought I'd actually need them. I poured myself a drink from the old vodka bottle in the fridge and sat down on the couch. My mind was racing. How long had she been with Hubert? 6 months? A year? Did it even matter? The most important thing now was my plan. I had to stay focused. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about the last 5 years. We had been happy once, or at least, I thought we were. Everything had changed the day my father died in that car accident. My mother hadn't mourned for long. It turned out she had been with someone else for over a year before the crash, a man she called Michael. After my father's death, she left with him, taking my sister with her, leaving me with my grandmother. For 3 years, I lived with my grandmother until she passed away too. At her funeral, my mother showed up dressed like she hadn't a care in the world and sold my grandmother's apartment, putting me in boarding school without a second thought. I was only 8 years old, but I knew what betrayal felt like. And now, it seemed, history was repeating itself. I poured another drink, the bitterness settling in my throat as I wondered how long this had been going on behind my back. I'll never forget that candy-munching girl in the princess dress who called me a beggar. There was an air of superiority about her, especially when she tossed me a caramel, looking down at me as if to say, "Eat it." After my mother and sister dropped me off at that boarding school, they quickly disappeared from my life. In that moment, I felt completely abandoned, alone in a vast, uncaring world. I won't go into the details of my life there. I've lived it, and it was harsh. But one lesson stood out. If you don't look out for yourself, no one else will. I learned to fight my way through life. During my time at the boarding school, my mother never came to visit. It became clear she didn't care about me at all. After finishing 11th grade, I enlisted in the Army. The military life came easily to me, and after a year of service, I entered military school. My duty took me to some of the most dangerous hotspots in our crumbling country and around the globe. During one operation, I sustained a head injury. While it wasn't life-threatening, the damage to my face was severe. The government provided several plastic surgeries that transformed my appearance entirely. Even my voice took on a deeper, more masculine tone. When I looked in the mirror after the last surgery, I saw a man shaped by life's hardships and hardened by the military, a man I almost grew to like. That was the moment a plan began to form in my mind, a plan to confront the heartless woman who had once been my life, along with her daughter. I didn't know exactly what I would do or how I would exact my revenge, but I was determined that it would be a reckoning. No, I had no intention of taking anyone's life. I simply wanted to make their existence as unbearable as mine had been. When my military contract ended, I was discharged into civilian life. They shook my hand, presented me with a medal, and handed me my military ticket. Just like that, I was forgotten. By that time, my heartache had dulled, and I no longer sought out my mother or sister. God would judge them. I had moved on. I found work as a mechanic at a service station, starting as an apprentice before moving up to a full mechanic. The pay was modest, but it was enough to get by. In the fall, I enrolled in a technical university, finding the coursework manageable, especially since I already had some engineering training. A year later, I graduated as a master mechanic. After 2 more years, the owner of the service station offered me a share in the business. Life was looking good. That's when everything changed, as it often does. At a colleague's birthday party, I met Jenny. She was a sweet, shy girl, moderately attractive and affectionately warm. I courted her for nearly 6 months, and to my surprise, I fell deeply in love. I couldn't imagine my life without her. She introduced me to her family. Her father owned a large construction firm, and Jenny was accustomed to a life of comfort. I didn't shy away from my past. I told them about my childhood spent in boarding schools. They raised their eyebrows and muttered disapprovingly, but Jenny stood by me. We got married before the new year, and 9 months later we welcomed a son. 3 years after that, a daughter completed our family. By the time I turned 30, I had transformed into a handsome man. As I walked through the city, I noticed the appreciative glances from girls and young women, but my heart belonged solely to my wife. The longer we were together, the more deeply I fell for her. My love was profound. I would have given my life for her. Yet after nearly 8 years of marriage, I began to sense a shift. Suddenly, I felt like a worthless loser in Jenny's eyes, incapable of providing for our family. I had worked hard as a co-owner and deputy director of the service station, and my income had always been sufficient. But now, everything had changed. When I came home, it felt like stepping into a factory of discontent. The psychological grind wore me down like an abandoned mill churning away in my mind. I spent more time at the service station, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I didn't suspect Jenny of infidelity until the day I saw it unfold right in front of me on my computer screen, her voice echoing in my ears, betraying my trust. About a year ago, her father had helped me get a job at his construction firm, placing me under the direct supervision of his deputy, who just happened to be my wife. That's how she managed to manipulate me completely. I signed contracts, transferred funds, and purchased equipment, all the while working primarily for her family's benefit. Everyone in that household seemed to thrive on one another's resources. That's when my revenge plan re-emerged, and nothing would divert me from my chosen path. I found a twisted pleasure in preparing my escape, plotting to leave their lives in ruins, just like mine had been. I played the part of the unsuspecting husband so convincingly that everyone bought it, especially my unfaithful wife. I started opening offshore accounts, funneling money to my father-in-law's companies. No one took me seriously. They saw me as just another gullible fool. Then, I established a firm in another city, where the funds from those offshore accounts began to flow in. My new company was still under the radar, but that would soon change. Years into my marriage, a coworker approached me with an intriguing overseas job offer in my field, but I turned it down. I was at the height of happiness, or so I thought. He left me his business card, telling me that people with my skills would always be in demand. But when the cracks in my marriage began to widen, I knew there was no turning back. I picked up my phone and dialed my old boss, asking for an appointment. A month later, I found myself on my first business trip abroad. By the end of that trip, my bank account had received a significant boost. I was living life to the fullest while Jenny was off with her secret lover, Hubert. I didn't care anymore. I had my own business and the power to shape my destiny. I had grown weary of my love. I felt burned out inside. That's what happens when you're consistently disrespected. But I wasn't done yet. I was about to reclaim my life in a way that would leave a lasting impact. The ashes of my former life would serve as a stark reminder to everyone who had wronged me. On the complexities of infidelity, a story of betrayal and resilience. When it comes to infidelity, women often approach the subject differently than men. Having been on the receiving end of this heart-wrenching experience, I can say that I have encountered my fair share of complexities. Jenny, the woman in question, had a way of making her actions cut deeper than I thought possible. I often wondered what she aimed to achieve by humiliating me in front of her lover, her family, and her co-workers. If her goal was to assert her power, she succeeded remarkably. But amid the emotional turmoil, my heart ached for her children, who were inevitably caught in the crossfire of their mother's choices. Still, I couldn't bring myself to intervene in her life. After all, I wasn't going to take her place. I simply wanted to understand what had transpired between us. "What happened in there?" Stephen asked, glancing at his daughter as she sipped her brandy.
"I don't know, Dad,"
Jenny replied, her voice trembling. "When I got there, Hubert was on the grass, writhing in pain. Everyone was yelling and calling for an ambulance." Jenny cast a confused look at her mother, then back at her father. Ever since childhood, she had harbored a fear of him, making her avoid eye contact now that they were facing a crisis. "Where was your husband?" Stephen asked, his tone stern. "He was there, standing aside as usual," Jenny shot back, her contempt bubbling to the surface. "Why would he help his wife's lover?" Stephen's expression hardened as he looked at his daughter. "How do you know? Only a lazy person wouldn't be talking about it. You've lost your mind. What do you see in that smug Hubert? When did you stop being satisfied with your husband?" His voice rose, echoing in the room as he struggled to comprehend Jenny's choices. "Eric is incapable of jealousy. He can't stand up for himself against anyone. Trust me, I've studied him," Jenny insisted, but there was a hint of doubt in her voice. As she poured herself another glass of brandy, it was clear she was grappling with her own feelings. "Where's your husband now? Why isn't he with you?" Stephen pressed.
"I went with Hubert to the hospital. When I came back, Eric was gone,"
Jenny admitted, pulling out her iPhone to call her husband, only to find his phone disconnected. "Great! So where is he? Where does he disappear to?" her father shot back, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "He's been gone for weeks, taking a vacation at his own expense, or at least he was," she confessed, her guilt palpable. "What do you mean he's been taking it?" Stephen inquired, his brows furrowing with concern.
"I fired him,"
Jenny said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "You did what? Say that again?" Stephen demanded, incredulity etched across his face.
"I fired him. He was getting cocky," she replied, struggling to hold her ground.
"Are you out of your mind?" her father asked, shaking his head in disbelief. "Back when you first started dating Eric, I tried to find out more about him. You know I have connections, but nobody could tell me anything useful. There was only one person who worked in a very important position who warned me to stay away from Eric. Now you're telling me he's some kind of coward?" Fear crept into Jenny's eyes.
"I heard that your Hubert fell face first onto a hot grill after saying some awful things about you. Do you think that's just a coincidence?"
"Eric was far away," she defended herself, but her father wasn't having any of it. "I get the impression my daughter is a complete fool," Stephen said, standing up as if he were ready to leave. It was clear that the tension in the room was rising. At that moment, Derek, who had been listening from a distance, thought he heard the rumble of a helicopter engine approaching. The sound grew louder and louder, filling the air with an ominous presence. He realized that it wasn't a mere coincidence. The pilots were slowing down and preparing for something. Derek pulled the metal tube of a rocket launcher from its hiding spot and aimed it at the battlefield. Suddenly, a red rocket shot up toward Marcus's position, lighting up the night sky. The helicopter circled overhead, releasing 2 blue arrows that erupted into bursts of fire, followed by the thunder of explosions. Shards of rock flew in every direction as Derek sought refuge behind a large boulder, hiding from the chaos. At that moment, he was consumed by a torrent of emotions: fear, rage, despair. He lay on the ground, tears streaming down his face, mumbling just one word over and over: ours. This story encapsulates the power of choice amid the complex tapestry of human existence. Through themes of betrayal, the pursuit of truth, and the resilience of hope, the characters navigate life's challenges. Their journeys serve as a poignant reminder that our decisions, no matter how small, shape our destinies in ways we might never fully understand. In the end, we are left to reflect on the consequences of our actions and the paths we choose to follow.